The exhaust of the unarmored Toyota Hilux burns in the blistering 100-degree desert heat. You check the heavy steel chamber of your customized tactical rifle for the third time in 10 minutes. You are not wearing a standard government uniform. You have no identifying flag patch on your shoulder. You are ambushed on this remote dirt road. There will be no close air support called in to save you, and no flag-draped coffin flown home. You are operating entirely in the gray in the zone of international conflict. You are a private military contract, level 1, the lucrative contract. You spent 6 grueling years dedicated to serving your country in an elite infantry unit. You mastered heavy weapons, you mastered complex urban tactics, and you deployed multiple times to extremely hostile environments. But when you finally returned to the civilian world, the incredibly slow pace of normal life felt excruciatingly boring. Home Depot runs on a Sunday afternoon felt like a slow death. You could not stand the silence of suburban neighborhoods or the trivial nature of corporate office meetings. Furthermore, standard military pay did not begin to cover the massive mortgage on your house. You quickly realize that your highly specific lethal skill set is worth an absolute fortune to the right buyer. You sign a lucrative, entirely deniable employment contract with a shadowy global logistics corporation operating out of London. You are immediately on an unmarked charter flight directly into a destabilized region of the Middle East. You realize immediately that the rules of engagement are entirely different out here. You are not deployed here to win the hearts and minds of the local populace. You are not here to build schools or hand out water. You are deployed here specifically to expertly protect a specific wealthy international oil executive and his massive corporate convoy. You are abruptly issued a cheap plastic ID badge that technically lists your legal profession as a logistics specialist. You are handed a heavily modified automatic rifle, thick ceramic plate carrier, and a terrifying blank check regarding exactly what physical force you choose to utilize to keep the client breathing. The immediate culture clash is profoundly jarring. You are actively living in luxurious compounds, securely hidden. You eat expensive food while standing behind massive concrete blast walls, heavily armed, while the actual local citizens starve in the chaotic streets outside. You realize that you are purely a corporate asset deployed to mitigate catastrophic financial risk. You begin distancing yourself emotionally from the fundamental reasons why the brutal war is actively being fought. You learn to stop asking questions about the underlying politics and focus purely on the immediate survival radius around the VIP. You do not talk to the locals. You simply lock a heavy magazine into your rifle and wait for the massive wire transfer to hit your offshore bank account. Level 2, the Urban Escort. Your first actual high-stakes active assignment is a highly dangerous route clearance VIP escort. You are part of 3 blacked-out armored SUVs tearing through the chaotic, crowded streets of a severely shattered city at 80 miles an hour. You are decisively assigned as the rear secure vehicle commander. Your singular job is to strictly ensure no unknown hostile vehicle overtakes the motorcade from behind. Your radio crackles with constant terse updates from the lead vehicle, calling out traffic patterns, stalled cars, and potential choke points. You rapidly learn that overwhelming, unpredictable speed is your absolute only true physical armor in a completely non-permissive urban environment. You systematically do not stop for clearly marked stoplights if an unmarked civilian vehicle merges entirely too closely to the VIP truck. Your hardened driver deliberately pits them violently off the side of the paved road entirely without a second thought. Is intentionally designed to visually project overwhelming kinetic force to deter organized ambushes. You constantly neurotically scan the deeply cratered rooftops above the street. You look intensely for the telltale optical glint of a hidden scope or the distinct physical posture of insurgent carrying a concealed rocket-propelled grenade. You watch the frantic, terrified eyes of civilian drivers as your armored convoy forces them off the road. The physical taxation of the intense vigilance is incredibly severe. After returning to the secure compound following an excruciating, tense 4-hour run, your protective body armor is soaked heavily with cold sweat. You cannot sleep comfortably in your air-conditioned bunk. You replay the heavily chaotic traffic patterns, specifically 1,000 tiny variables that absolutely could have resulted crucially in your own physical death. You start drinking heavily at the secure compound bar just to quiet your hyperactive nervous system, enough to grab 4 hours of sleep before the morning run. You realize the extreme adrenaline is not a temporary rush. It is a permanent neurochemical addiction. You begin to crave the terrifying speed of the convoy, more than you crave actual peace and quiet. Level 3, the IED ambush. Year 2 of your highly lucrative contract. The absolute inevitable statistical event finally happens. You are escorting a heavy engineering convoy through a remarkably narrow, highly contested, treacherous mountain pass. A massive, totally deafening, concussive explosion rocks an incredibly complex, improvised explosive device. Buried convoy grinds to a violently dirt road. The shattered convoy, a violently sudden and chaotic halt in the dense black smoke. Your ears are ringing violently, drowning out the immediate sound of the blast with a piercing whine. Instantly, highly aggressive machine gun suppression fire violently rains directly down onto your position entirely from the high rocky ridge line. You violently kick your heavy armored door wide open, throwing your physical body forcefully behind the dense engine block the shattered SUV. The standard military procedure would be to call for overwhelming Cloheglux air support and wait securely in cover. You do not definitively have that luxury. You are entirely alone on the ground with zero quick reaction force coming to extract you. The radio is completely dead. You repeatedly expose your body, delivering rapid, suppressing rifle fire upward, directly into the jagged rocks above. You grab the terrified, screaming awesome corporate client directly from the deeply disabled truck. You physically drag him through the dirt while rounds violently strike the pavement. You throw him forcefully into the back of your vehicle and floor entirely behind, leaving the burning wreckage entirely behind. The tires scream against the broken asphalt. You successfully survive the day, but you suddenly realize fundamentally that your literal life is merely a highly calculated financial line item logged strictly on a corporate expense report. The sheer expendability of your own existence makes terrifyingly clear. You are completely a ghost in the machine, explicitly hired to die silently if the operational mathematics somehow randomly demand it. Level 4. The static defense. The complex nature of the corporate contracts abruptly changes. You are exclusively hired to aggressively fortify and hold a remote, highly controversial, massive lithium mining operation precisely of Central Africa. The climate goes profoundly volatile to dense, suffocating, dense jungle heat. The sprawling mining complex presents billions of dollars in foreign investment, and the local warlords release the heavy machinery investment. You are no longer actively moving, you are waiting. This is the agonizing psychological reality of remote static defense. You standing on an elevated wooden sniper tower, meticulously overlooking endlessly stark, barren scrubland. The immense boredom is texturally soul-crushing. You are highly trained tactical operators assigned exclusively to babysitting a completely massive piece of dust entirely for a foreign executive completely in an entirely separate hemisphere. You pass the heavy hours by actively disassembling an ensembled rifle your entire beyond blindfold until your fingers crack and bleed. You count the rusted links in the perimeter chain fence over and over just to keep your brain actively used. The profound isolation aggressively breeds intense, dark paranoia deeply into the men. Every single rapidly moving shadow at night could violently be a heavily armed rebel raiding party, or quite simply a tiny wandering goat. Your finger constantly steals over the massive steel trigger of a heavy machine. You are slowly going completely psychologically insane from the staggering absolute silence of the profoundly empty desert. The internal trash contracting camp actively begin to violently devolve into brutal petty disputes over trivial things like water rations and satellite phone time. You actively watch highly trained professionals completely lose their emotional composure over a missing pack of cigarettes, completely realizing that the sheer endless waiting is actively far more psychologically destructive than actual direct violent combat. Level 5. The Fragile Brotherhood. You realize explicitly the deeply sinister psychological reality of the private military contracting industry. You are working directly alongside highly cynical men from all over the global world. You work with former Spetsnaz operators who possess absolutely zero rules of engagement. You work with disgraced former special forces who were quietly discharged for pushing the line too far. You work with controversial South African mercenary veterans entirely forged in brutal bush border conflicts of the previous decade. There is an intense, fundamentally fragile, but it is deeply fundamentally fragile. You are absolutely definitely not united correctly by deep, strict political loyalty to a sovereign nation. You are strictly united solely by the massive daily high-yield wire transfer hitting your heavily encrypted offshore banking account. You distinctly hear dark, terrifying whispered stories of other rogue contracts who successfully took massive dangerous contracts working heavily for the absolute highest bidder, completely regardless entirely of the deeply horrifying dark morality of the brutal regime they supported. Some contractors openly sell seized rebel weaponry directly back to different rebel factions just to artificially extend the duration of their own lucrative contracts. You slowly look strictly at the highly dangerous men standing directly next to you on the dark perimeter. You intensely wonder exactly which side of the heavy assault rifle they would practically functionally be on if the contract suddenly completely reversed overnight. You realize that you cannot trust the very man actively standing shoulder to shoulder with you to unconditionally cover your back. The trust is purely transactional, and when the money stops flowing from the anonymous offshore accounts, the loyalty evaporates instantly into the desert sand. You stop talking about your back in the United States. You stop entirely sharing actual personal details. You become a completely empty vessel, exactly projecting nothing, never place sense any in the strict pack, never deeply sense any vulnerability or weakness. Level 6. The Abandoned Siege. The underlying political situation in the hostile country abruptly deteriorates completely. You are actively guarding a critical national oil refinery deep inside highly hostile territory. The local rebel forces launch a massive, entirely coordinated siege directly against the high perimeter walls. The initial warning siren blares through the dusty hot air precisely at 4 in the morning, immediately followed by the terrifying, deafening whistle of incoming artillery. This is not a disorganized hit-and-run tactic anymore. This is a highly organized utilizing sniper stolen from the retreating National Army. This is Mr. Retreating National Army. You command a small specialized unit of deeply foreign contractors completely dedicated to violently defending the primary crude oil control room. The heavy mortar rounds viciously strike the outer compound, violently shattering heavy concrete barriers and igniting massive secondary chemical storage tanks. The heat from the raging hydrocarbon fires is absolutely suffocating, burning the oxygen directly out of the air. You are massively outnumbered, roughly 50 to 1. The sheer volume of incoming rifle fire physically pins you to the concrete floor of the control building. You coordinate a highly brutal, desperate physical defense utilizing heavy automated weapon systems. The terrifying noises and coughs of the continuous heavy battle is explicitly deafening. You call the corporate formal headquarters, precisely in Europe, directly on a secure satellite phone, formally requesting immediate airborne helicopter extraction for the key trapped executives. The corporate liaison cleanly and clinically informs you strictly that the actual mathematical risk profile is fundamentally entirely too high. They will definitely not logically send an expensive rescue chopper directly into a confirmed hot zone. You are furious, entirely realizing the fundamentals of private military service. When the massive battle turns definitively lost, the corporate company, you throw the incredibly expensive satellite phone violently against the concrete wall, completely shattering it entirely. You You are forced to orchestrate a terrifying, violent, overnight tactical breakout maneuver directly through the heavily hostile city entirely on your own. You aggressively run a completely chaotic gauntlet entirely of heavy urban sniper fire, completely relying explicitly on strictly your raw, physical, tactical grit to survive the nightmare. You lose 2 of your own men in the chaotic retreat, and you are entirely unable to recover their bodies. The company officially labels them as missing civilian logistical personnel, completely erasing their martial sacrifice from the public record. Level 7, Assault. In the oceanic ruhrgriff of the lucrative of shifts toward highly specialized direct kinetic action. A major multinational oceanic shipping corporation formally successfully hires your highly specialized firm strictly to retrieve a massive commercial cargo vessel hijacked aggressively directly off the highly hostile pirate coast of Somalia. The corporation strongly refuses to simply pay the requested ransom, explicitly preferring to send an overwhelming physical message to the criminal syndicates operating in the Gulf. You permanently transition strictly from the dusty burning desert exactly to the highly unpredictable open ocean. The nautical environment is physically punishing and entirely foreign. You are violently inserted explicitly from a rapid tactical transport boat, violently bouncing in the incredibly dark night massive oceanic swells. You rapidly, quietly apply false specialized heavy grappling hooks firmly onto the deeply rusted heavy steel physical hull exclusively of the massive drifting freighter. The physical assault is terrifyingly rapid and brutally unforgiving. You climb the 40-foot vertical steel wall wearing 70 pounds of heavy gear. You forcefully, systematically breach the primary main bridge of the massive heavy vessel, explicitly successfully executing precise, ruthless, extremely tight, close quarters lethal combat. The pirates are overwhelmed deeply in minutes. But you quickly caught entirely real off guard. But you cleap ethical blank void completely of your exact men driven completely by profound decisive actions. You are formally hunting utter starvation who are currently extreme absolute poverty and heavy human desperation. You are actively, legally, aggressively executing them, effectively precise, advanced, highly thermal suppressed automatic weaponry, deeply declining for protect electronics, fully full of cheap consumer plastic electronics entirely for absolutely wealthy distant executives. You actively secure the massive vessel entirely without a single casualty to your own team, but the distinct operational victory fundamentally feels completely, undeniably hollow. You start to struggle explicitly with the fact you possess absolutely zero moral high ground. You are merely an extraordinarily well-equipped thug, essentially working dynamically for the biggest wallet. Level 8. The civilian casualty, the absolute worst possible geopolitically unfolds. Your specialized, localized squad of heavy contractors is not trendless, localized, involved decisively in a massive, deeply tragic civilian casualty event during a chaotic heavy firefight in a massive, crowded urban foreign marketplace. An insurgent embedded explicitly in a dense crowd of innocent people fired a rocket-propelled grenade at your armored convoy, and your team violently returned overwhelmingly disproportionate suppressive fire directly into the thick crowd, accidentally striking dozens of entirely innocent bystanders. The international news media aggressively, instantly broadcast the horrific, chaotic smartphone footage to the entire world. The political fallout is instantaneous and absolutely incredibly devastating. The massive international corporation you actively immediately formally denies all definitive physical knowledge of your specific operations. They immediately, formally, actively, explicitly cut exactly your entire lucrative contract. They digitally erase your employment records from their primary servers. The domestic federal government openly, legally threatens to investigate you for international war crimes. You are entirely stranded perfectly securely in a highly hostile foreign country with absolutely zero diplomatic immunity and heavily frozen offshore bank accounts. You and your isolated team are forced to immediately drop your primary identities completely. You abandon your heavy tactical armor in a local dumpster. You steal a rusted civilian vehicle and physically drive incredibly fast, strictly towards a highly remote border crossing, actively utilizing incredibly deep black market connections strictly to perfectly smoothly quietly purchase entirely forged international passports. You transform instantly from highly respected, heavily armed elite corporate security professionals completely directly into terrified internationally hunted fugitives running explicitly for your literal lives. You deeply realize that the very system that exclusively made you incredibly wealthy is precisely exactly huskily, forcefully hunting you securely down to strictly, silently, solidly, fiscally seats you permanently. Level 9. You successfully navigate the deeply chaotic border crossings securely, utilizing massive, corrupt of hidden emergency cash to bribe deeply corrupt regional officials. You disappear entirely into the dense, heavily crowded population of Southeast Asia. You settle in a tiny coastal village in Thailand, paying for absolute anonymity. You live in a humid, squalid apartment under a completely false identity. You have successfully evaded international custody, but your entire life is shattered. You possess an offshore bank account with $3 million, but you cannot log into the financial portal because the FBI Cyber Division is monitoring the IP ping. You are technically a self-made millionaire, but you live on cheap street food and use a rusted bicycle to travel. You cannot form relationships. You cannot talk to other English-speaking expats because every casual conversation feels like a federal interrogation. If a tourist asks where you are from, you lie seamlessly. If a local police officer looks at you for too long, your heart rate spikes to 150 beats per minute. The mental exhaustion of the permanent fugitive lifestyle is staggering. You sleep with a loaded pistol tucked directly under your pillow, waking up covered in a cold sweat every time a stray dog barks in the alley outside. You realize that the absolute worst prison cell is not actually built from steel bars and concrete. The worst prison is an open island paradise where you are completely trapped inside your own terrifying paranoia. You spend hours sitting on the beach, looking out at the ocean, playing the exact same fatal firefight over and over in your head, wondering if the money was ever actually worth losing your own soul. Level 10. The suicidal bargain. You are sitting at a small plastic table drinking when the inevitable finally happens. Two men expensive leather duffel bags walk into the open-air bar. They are not local police. They are not Interpol agents. They have the distinct, incredibly specific physical posture of men who have carried heavy weapons for a living. You recognize the walk immediately because you have walked exactly like that your entire adult life. They sit down directly across from you. They order a drink. They do not pull a weapon. One of them slowly reaches into his bag and places a manila folder on the wet table. It is an incredibly detailed corporate alidagasyor containing your current alias, exact daily routines, and high-resolution photographs of your rusted bicycle. The global logistics corporation that burned you a decade ago has finally tracked you down, but they are not here to execute you. The man cleanly informs you that the political landscape has shifted yet again. The company desperately needs an experienced operator to lead a highly deniable, suicidal reconnaissance mission directly into a heavily fortified island compound. The corporate proxy offers you a terrifying bargain. Take the point position on the strike team, and in return, the massive bounty on your head is completely wiped clean from the international database. You will get your real name back. You sit staring at the folder. You know exactly what the job entails. You know statistically that you will likely never walk off that island alive. But you look at the humid, invisible, terrifying prison you have built for yourself in the slums. You reach out, grab the manila folder, and nod slowly. You realize with a chilling finality that you never actually escaped the battlefield. Once you sell your physical existence to the highest bidder, your war never actually ends until they decide to punch your final ticket in the dirt. I want you guys to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more deep dive reality checks of the most intense, unforgiving professions on Earth. Drop a comment below telling me exactly what brutal career you want me to cover next.